November 14, 1944, Camp Douglas, Wyoming. German Wehrmacht Obergefreiter Erwin Beckmann steps through the farmhouse door of the Morrison family ranch outside Douglas. The smell hits him first. Roast beef, mashed potatoes with real butter, green beans seasoned with bacon fat. For a man who has eaten watery turnip soup and black bread for 8 months as a prisoner of war, the aroma threatens to buckle his knees. The dining room table stretches before him, set with white china plates, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles. 6 Morrison family members rise from their chairs as Erwin enters, flanked by Corporal Jimmy Patterson of the United States Army. Mrs. Eleanor Morrison, a woman in her 50s with graying hair pinned back in victory rolls, extends her hand toward an empty chair. "Welcome to our home," she says in careful, practiced German.
Willkommen in unserem Haus.
Erwin freezes. In 2 years of Wehrmacht service from Normandy to the Ruhr Valley, through the horror of the Falaise Pocket and his capture near Aachen in September, no enemy had ever invited him to their dinner table. American soldiers had given him cigarettes, shared their rations, treated his wounded arm with genuine medical supplies. But this crosses a line he cannot comprehend. This is Sunday dinner with the enemy. The Morrison family waits. 16-year-old Robert Morrison shifts nervously, his Sunday shirt collar starched stiff. His younger sister Mary clutches a doll, staring at the German soldier with wide eyes. Mr. Harold Morrison, a rancher whose weathered hands speak of 30 years wrestling Wyoming cattle, gestures again toward the empty chair. The family has lost their eldest son, Lieutenant Thomas Morrison of the United States Army Air Forces, shot down over Schweinfurt 3 months ago. His photograph sits on the mantelpiece in dress uniform, smiling, 22 years old forever. Yet here they stand, inviting his killer's countrymen to break bread at their table. Erwin's military training screams warnings. Fraternization with enemy civilians violates Wehrmacht regulations. His father, Hauptmann Friedrich Beckmann of the 1st Bavarian Reserve Division, died at Verdun fighting Americans in 1918. His brother Wilhelm fell at Stalingrad. Every instinct tells him to refuse, to maintain the dignity of German military bearing even in captivity. But hunger gnaws at his stomach, and something deeper pulls him forward. The Morrison family radiates a warmth he has not felt since leaving his mother's kitchen in Würzburg 26 months ago. Corporal Patterson nudges him gently. "It's all right, soldier. Just dinner." Erwin steps forward and sits. The chair creaks under his weight. Mrs. Morrison immediately begins serving, ladling mashed potatoes onto his plate with the unconscious generosity of a woman who has fed hungry people her entire life. The portions stagger him. In Germany, his family survives on ration cards that provide 1,125 calories per day for civilians. His mother writes of boiling potato peels for soup, of children fainting in school from hunger. Yet here, this American farm family serves him enough food for 3 men. Mr. Morrison bows his head. "Robert, would you say grace?" The 16-year-old clears his throat. "Heavenly Father, we thank you for this food, for this day of rest, and for the opportunity to show Christian hospitality to all people, even those we do not understand. We pray for peace, for our Thomas in heaven, and for the safe return of all sons to their mothers. Amen." Erwin's hands tremble. The prayer includes him, a German prisoner, in its circle of divine protection. No Wehrmacht chaplain ever prayed for enemy soldiers. No Nazi ideology allows for this possibility. He has been taught that Americans are soft, degenerate, ruled by Jewish puppet masters who exploit their working classes. Yet this family, who has lost their son to German bullets, prays for his soul. The meal begins in awkward silence. Erwin struggles with American table customs. He holds his fork in his left hand, his knife in his right, cutting and eating in the continental European style his mother taught him. The Morrison family cuts their meat with their right hand, then switches the fork to the right hand to eat, laying the knife down between bites. Small differences that highlight the vast cultural chasm separating them. "Where are you from in Germany?" Mrs. Morrison asks in her halting German. "Würzburg, in Bavaria." Erwin replies in equally careful English. "My family." They have vineyard. Small vineyard. Mary Morrison, perhaps 10 years old, speaks up suddenly. Do you have a little sister? The question pierces him.
Ja.
Yes. Greta. She is 8 years old now. What does she like to play? Erwin sets down his fork. The question forces him to remember Greta's laugh, her delight in chasing their cat through the vineyard rows, her tears when he left for military service. She likes, like dolls, like you, and she makes, how do you say, Lebkuchen, gingerbread cookies. Very good cook, my Greta. Mary brightens. Mama makes gingerbread too. For Christmas. The conversation flows slowly, awkwardly, but it flows. Robert Morrison reveals his fascination with aircraft, peppering Erwin with questions about German planes he has seen. Erwin describes the Messerschmitt Bf 109 screaming overhead during the Normandy fighting, the terror and beauty of aerial combat witnessed from the ground. Harold Morrison asks about German farming techniques, comparing notes on crop rotation and livestock management with surprising mutual respect. As the afternoon progresses, the artificial barriers begin dissolving. Erwin finds himself laughing at Harold Morrison's story about a bull that terrorized the county fair. Mrs. Morrison shows genuine concern when Erwin mentions his wounded arm, insisting on examining the healing shrapnel scar. She disappears into the kitchen and returns with a tin of salve, the same remedy she uses on her family. The abundance overwhelms him. After the roast beef and potatoes come fresh green beans from the Morrison family garden, canned peaches in heavy syrup, apple pie made with real butter and sugar. Coffee flows freely, rich and black. Not the ersatz chicory brew German civilians choke down. When Mrs. Morrison offers second helpings, then thirds, Erwin struggles not to weep. He calculates the food costs in his head, translating to Reichsmarks and ration points. This single meal represents weeks of German civilian rations. Mrs. Morrison, he manages. This food. In Germany now, this food feeds family for 1 month. She pauses in serving him another slice of pie. I can't imagine such hardship. American soldiers, they give us much food in camp. But civilian food in Germany, he searches for words. Children, they are thin, very thin. Old people, they die from hunger. Not fighting. Just no food. The table falls silent. The reality of wartime Europe settles over the Morrison family like a dark cloud. They have experienced rationing, victory gardens, meatless Tuesdays. But their privations pale compared to the starvation stalking German cities. Robert Morrison breaks the silence. Is that why you're fighting? For food. Erwin considers the question seriously. I fight because I am German soldier. I am ordered to fight. But now, I think maybe I fight for nothing. My brother Wilhelm, he dies at Stalingrad for nothing. My father, he dies at Verdun for nothing. And German children, they starve for nothing. Harold Morrison leans forward. What will you do when the war ends? I go home to Vineyard. I help rebuild Germany. Better Germany. No more war with America. That's all any of us want, Harold says quietly. For our sons to come home and never have to fight again. The afternoon stretches into evening. Mrs. Morrison teaches Erwin to play checkers, a game unknown in Germany. Mary shows him her doll collection, chattering about their names and personalities with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood. Robert demonstrates his model airplane collection, including a surprisingly accurate Focke-Wulf 190 that makes Erwin homesick for German engineering. As shadows lengthen across the Wyoming prairie, Corporal Patterson announces it is time to return to camp. The family gathers around Erwin for farewells. Mrs. Morrison presses a package into his hands. Leftover roast beef, a jar of peaches, and a small American flag pin. For your sister Greta, she explains. When you write to her, the gesture devastates him. This woman, whose son died fighting Germany, gives gifts for his German sister. She has transformed him from faceless enemy to human being deserving of compassion. The Nazi ideology that sustained him through 2 years of combat crumbles in the face of simple Christian kindness. Mrs. Morrison, he whispers, I am sorry for your son Thomas. I am sorry for this war. She takes his hands in hers. I know you are, Erwin. I know you are. The ride back to Camp Douglas passes in contemplative silence. Corporal Patterson, a Minnesota farm boy himself, understands the significance of what just occurred. For 3 hours, enemies became neighbors. Americans and Germans found common ground in family stories, shared meals, and mutual respect. Camp Douglas buzzes with similar tales. Of 425,000 prisoners of war held in the United States during World War II, thousands experienced Sunday dinners with American families. The numbers tell a remarkable story. 51,000 Italian prisoners, 350,000 Germans, several thousand Japanese, all discovering America through kitchen tables and family conversations. At Camp Greeley, Colorado, German POW Manfred Weiss writes to his wife in Hamburg describing Sunday dinner with the Catholic parish of Saints Peter and Paul. Liebste Anna, he begins. The Americans feed us like kings while our people eat grass soup. How can we call such people enemies? His letter, censored but approved by camp authorities, carries a photograph of him sitting at a long church table surrounded by smiling American parishioners. In Boston's North End, Italian service unit member Marco Conti boards the Sunday ferry from Pettox Island to attend dinner with the Benedetto family, Italian-Americans who lost their son Anthony at Anzio. The evening dissolves into tears and embraces as Marco shares news from Anthony's hometown in Sicily. Mrs. Rose Benedetto declares Marco her adopted son, beginning a correspondence that continues long after the war ends. The moral complexity stuns American families. At St. Mary's Catholic Church in Douglas, Wyoming, Father Michael O'Brien struggles with the ethics of his parish's prisoner dinner program. We are commanded to love our enemies, he tells his congregation during Sunday Massachusetts, but how do we reconcile Christian charity with patriotic duty? How do we break bread with men whose armies killed our sons? The answer comes from Mrs. Dorothy Fleming, who lost both her boys at Normandy and still invites German prisoners to Sunday dinner. Hatred never brought my sons back, she tells the packed church. But maybe kindness can prevent another mother from losing hers. The prisoners themselves wrestle with devastating cognitive dissonance. Unteroffizier Dieter Hoffmann of the 352nd Infantry Division, captured at St. Vith during the Battle of the Bulge, finds his worldview shattered by Sunday dinner with the Lutheran congregation in Wheatland, Wyoming. For 18 months, Nazi propaganda told him Americans were racially inferior, culturally degenerate, militarily weak. Yet these farmers display strength, dignity, and spiritual depth that challenges everything he believes. The Americans are not what we were told, he writes to his father in Stuttgart. They work harder than any German farmer I know. Their children are polite and educated. Their women are strong but gentle. Their men fight like lions but show mercy to the defeated. How did our leaders deceive us so completely? His father's response, delayed by Allied bombing of German postal services, arrives 3 months later. Perhaps we deceived ourselves, Main Sohn. Perhaps we wanted to believe we were superior because the alternative was too frightening to consider. The Sunday dinner programs reveal America's stunning abundance to prisoners accustomed to wartime scarcity. At a Methodist church supper in Basin, Wyoming, German Afrika Korps veteran Rolf Zimmermann counts 17 different dishes on the buffet table. Fresh beef, pork, chicken, multiple vegetables, 3 types of bread. For desserts, he estimates the meal's caloric content exceeds 3,000 calories per person, nearly triple the daily ration for German civilians. American families notice the prisoner's amazement. Sarah Chun, whose Chinese-American family hosts Italian POWs near Fort Francis E. Warren, observes their guests' careful, methodical eating habits. They save half their portions for later, she notes in her diary. Not because they're not hungry, but because they can't believe there will be more food tomorrow. The abundance extends beyond food. Clean clothes appear weekly. Hot showers flow without restriction. Medical care addresses every minor ailment. Libraries stock thousands of books in multiple languages. Musical instruments enable prisoner orchestras and choirs. Movie theaters show Hollywood films twice weekly. Italian prisoner Giuseppe Romano writes to his brother in occupied Rome. The Americans treat us better than our own officers treated us. We have warm barracks, clean laundry, abundant food, medical care, education, entertainment. Their own soldiers receive the same treatment. This is an army that values human life, even enemy life. The cultural education flows both directions. German prisoners teach American families traditional Bavarian folk songs during after-dinner entertainment. Italian POWs share Mediterranean cooking techniques with farm wives curious about olive oil and garlic. Japanese prisoners, fewer in number but equally welcomed in Hawaii, demonstrate origami and calligraphy for fascinated American children. These exchanges plant seeds for post-war reconciliation. Erwin Beckmann maintains correspondence with the Morrison family for 37 years after returning to Germany. He rebuilds his family vineyard, names his daughter Eleanor after Mrs. Morrison, and sends Wyoming wine every Christmas until Harold Morrison's death in 1981. His 1963 letter describes bringing his own family to America to visit their second family in Wyoming, cementing friendships forged over Sunday dinners during the war. The transformation proves profound for American families as well. The Morrison children grow up understanding that enemies are human beings led astray by evil leaders, not inherently evil themselves. Robert Morrison, inspired by his conversations with German prisoners, studies international relations at the University of Wyoming and later serves as a cultural attaché in the American Embassy in Bonn during the 1960s. His sister Mary becomes a teacher specializing in German exchange students. The statistical impact defies expectations. Post-war surveys reveal that 89% of German POWs who experienced American family dinners express positive feelings toward the United States. Among those who emigrate after the war, 73% cite family dinner experiences as decisive factors in their decision. The personal connections forged over Sunday meals contribute significantly to German-American reconciliation during the Marshall Plan era. Opposition to the dinner programs comes from predictable sources. American veterans organizations protest, coddling prisoners while American soldiers die overseas. Letters to newspaper editors condemn, fraternizing with Nazis, and demand harsh treatment for enemy prisoners. The controversy intensifies when photographs appear showing German POWs relaxing at American dinner tables while Gold Star mothers mourn their sons. Walter Winchell, the influential radio commentator, attacks the programs repeatedly during his Sunday night broadcasts. While American boys freeze in foxholes and die on foreign beaches, he declares, their government wines and dines the enemy in country club comfort. This is not Christian charity, folks. This is national suicide. Military officials defend the programs on practical grounds. General Dwight D. Eisenhower argues that humane treatment of prisoners encourages German surrenders, saving American lives. A German soldier who knows he will be well treated in American captivity is more likely to surrender rather than fight to the death, he explains to Congress. Every German who surrenders is one less enemy shooting at American boys. The Geneva Convention mandates humane treatment, but the Sunday dinner programs exceed minimum requirements by considerable margins. Camp commandants justify the extra privileges as psychological warfare. We are winning German hearts and minds, explains Colonel William Harrison, commander of Camp Douglas. These men will return to Germany as ambassadors of American values. They will tell their families and friends that Americans are not the monsters Nazi propaganda portrayed. The strategy succeeds beyond expectations. German POWs returning home become influential voices for democracy during post-war reconstruction. Former prisoners establish German-American friendship societies, promote cultural exchanges, and support democratic political parties. Their testimonies about American kindness help legitimize the American occupation and accelerate German integration into the Western Alliance. Japanese prisoners face different circumstances due to cultural barriers and racial prejudice. American families on the West Coast remain scarred by Pearl Harbor and suspicious of Japanese ethnic features. Sunday dinner invitations for Japanese POWs cluster primarily in Hawaii, where large Japanese-American populations provide cultural intermediaries. At the Anulialai internment camp in Hawaii, a complex moral irony emerges. Japanese-American families, themselves imprisoned by their own government, host Sunday dinners for Japanese prisoners of war. Nisei families like the Yamadas, whose son serves with the heroic 442nd Regimental Combat Team in Europe, welcome captured Japanese soldiers to their barracks for traditional meals. The conversations prove heartbreaking. Japanese POW Hiroshi Tanaka, a former schoolteacher from Kyoto, struggles to understand how Japanese Americans maintain loyalty to a country that imprisons them. "Why do you not hate America?" he asks during dinner with the Yamada family. "They treat you like criminals for being Japanese." George Yamada, whose son earned the Distinguished Service Cross fighting Germans in Italy, responds with quiet dignity. "America made a mistake imprisoning us. But America admits mistakes and tries to correct them. Japan would never admit error, would never apologize, would never change. That is why I remain American." The exchange shatters Tanaka's understanding of Japanese cultural superiority. American-Japanese families demonstrate greater strength, flexibility, and resilience than anything he witnessed in militaristic Japan. Their children excel in camp schools. Their businesses prosper despite discrimination. Their soldiers fight with legendary courage for a country that wronged them. Sunday dinners with Italian prisoners prove most successful due to Italy's co-belligerent status after September 1943 and large Italian-American populations eager to help. In Boston's North End, Italian service unit members attend Mass at St. Leonard's Church, followed by enormous family dinners that stretch through entire afternoons. These gatherings become joyous celebrations as Italian-Americans reconnect with their homeland through prisoner testimony. Families separated by emigration for decades receive news of relatives, villages, and traditions through prisoner accounts. The cultural bridge building works both ways as American-born Italian descendants rediscover their heritage through authentic contact with recent immigrants. Marco Conti describes Sunday dinner with the Romano family in Boston's North End. Signora Romano prepares feast like my grandmother in Sicily. 12 courses, 3 meats, 6 vegetables, pasta made fresh, wine from family vineyard, desserts until we cannot move. But more than food, she gives me family. Her son died fighting for America at Anzio, yet she calls me son, holds me when I cry for my mother, makes me promise to return after war. These connections prove lasting. Conti emigrates to Boston after the war, marries an Italian-American woman, and establishes a successful restaurant featuring recipes learned during his captivity. His children grow up calling Mrs. Romano Nana, bridging generational and cultural gaps through bonds forged during wartime Sunday dinners. The economic impact of prisoner labor becomes crucial to American agricultural production. By late 1944, POW employment reaches 913% participation, with prisoners earning standard local wages paid to the United States Treasury. The $22 million generated by June 1945 offsets camp operating costs while providing essential labor for sugar beet harvests, lumber operations, and food processing. Farm families hosting Sunday dinners often employ the same prisoners during weekdays, creating sustained relationships beyond single meals. The Clausen family near Whitewater, Kansas, employs German Afrika Korps veteran Gunther Schroer for autumn harvest work in 1944. Sunday dinners at the Clausen table evolve into deep friendship as Gunther shares stories of North African desert warfare while learning Mennonite farming techniques. After the war, when food shortages devastate post-war Germany, the Clausen family sends care packages of flour, rice, and corn to Gunther's family in bomb-ravaged Essen. The correspondence continues for decades, with Gunther's children eventually studying agriculture at Kansas State University on scholarships funded by the Clausen family. The moral education proves mutual. American families discover that enemies possess the same hopes, fears, dreams, and loves as themselves. German prisoners learn that Americans fight not from hatred but from conviction, not for conquest but for principles. The Sunday dinner table becomes a classroom where both sides study the humanity of their opponents. Mrs. Agnes Murphy, whose husband died at Guadalcanal, writes to her sister about hosting German prisoners. "I expected to hate them. I wanted to hate them for Jim's sake. But sitting across the dinner table, watching them talk about their wives and children, seeing them cry when they speak of home, cannot hate them. They are boys far from their mothers, just like my Jim was a boy far from his mother when he died. The transformation challenges fundamental assumptions about warfare and national identity. American families realize that German prisoners are not Nazi fanatics but ordinary men caught in extraordinary circumstances. Many joined the Wehrmacht through conscription rather than conviction. Most fight from duty rather than ideology. Nearly all long for peace and home rather than conquest and glory. German prisoners discover that Americans fight from principle rather than propaganda. Their hosts demonstrate genuine religious faith, strong family values, and deep patriotism without hatred for other peoples. The contrast with Nazi ideology proves stark. Americans show strength through mercy rather than cruelty, confidence through openness rather than secrecy, patriotism through inclusion rather than exclusion. The Sunday dinner programs create ripple effects that extend far beyond individual relationships. Children who grow up knowing former enemies as family friends develop different attitudes toward international conflict. They approach foreign policy debates with nuanced understanding that enemies are human beings rather than abstract threats. Robert Morrison, who spent Sunday afternoons discussing aircraft with German prisoners, later advocates for NATO expansion as a diplomat in Europe. But his advocacy stems from personal relationships rather than military doctrine. He understands German fears because he knew German soldiers as human beings. His diplomatic success flows from genuine empathy forged over childhood dinner tables. The programs also influence American religious communities in lasting ways. Churches that host Sunday dinners for prisoners develop strong commitments to peace activism and international relief work. They understand concretely rather than abstractly what it means to love one's enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Father Michael O'Brien, initially skeptical of the Douglas prisoner dinner program, becomes a lifelong advocate for international reconciliation. After the war, he organizes exchanges between Wyoming parishes and German churches devastated by Allied bombing. His efforts contribute to the Sister City movement linking American and German communities during the Cold War era. The success of Sunday dinner programs influences post-war foreign policy in subtle but significant ways. Military officials who observed prisoner transformations advocate for generous treatment of defeated enemies. The Marshall Plan's success partially reflects lessons learned about winning hearts and minds through kindness rather than conquest. General George Marshall himself references prisoner programs when justifying European Reconstruction aid to skeptical congressmen. We proved during the war that American generosity can transform enemies into friends, he argues. Feed a German prisoner at an American dinner table, and he becomes a lifelong advocate for American values. Feed a starving German city, and it becomes a bulwark against communist expansion. The long-term strategic value proves immense. West Germany's rapid integration into the Western Alliance owes much to positive American image cultivation during the war. Former prisoners return home as cultural ambassadors, countering Soviet propaganda about American imperialism with personal testimony about American kindness. The contrast with Soviet treatment becomes stark. German prisoners in Soviet camps endure starvation, forced labor, brutal punishment, and years of political indoctrination. Those who survive return home as broken men harboring deep resentment toward communist ideology. The choice between Western democracy and Soviet communism becomes easy for Germans who experienced both systems. As 1944 transitions to 1945, the Sunday dinner programs expand despite continued controversy. Military officials recognize their strategic value. Religious leaders embrace their moral imperative. Farm families appreciate their practical benefits. Even skeptical Americans gradually accept that humane treatment serves national interests better than harsh punishment. The numbers tell the story. 425,000 prisoners of war in American custody, with thousands participating in Sunday dinner programs across the nation. Each meal represents a small victory over hatred, a modest triumph of humanity over ideology, a quiet revolution in the understanding of what it means to be enemies in wartime. For Erwin Beckmann, sitting at the Morrison family table on that November afternoon in 1944, the revelation proves transformative. He entered their farmhouse as a German soldier defined by uniform, ideology, and national identity. He leaves as a human being connected to other human beings across the artificial boundaries of war. The letters he sends home to Germany carry a message that spreads through word of mouth across the bomb-shattered Reich. Americans are not the monsters Nazi propaganda portrayed. They are families who mourn their dead, work their land, worship their God, and love their children just like Germans do. The war may continue for months longer, but the peace begins at American dinner tables where former enemies discover their common humanity. Years later, after the war ends and the world rebuilds, Erwin Beckmann will tell his grandchildren about the Sunday he learned that enemies can become friends through the simple act of sharing a meal. He will describe Mrs. Morrison's kindness, Harold Morrison's wisdom, and the children who saw past his uniform to the man beneath. He will explain how a single afternoon changed his understanding of America, humanity, and the possibility for peace among nations. The Sunday dinner programs of World War II prove that even in humanity's darkest hours, light can penetrate the darkness through simple acts of compassion. Around American dinner tables, former enemies discover that peace begins not with treaties or declarations but with the willingness to see each other as children of the same God, worthy of the same dignity, capable of the same love. In a war that would claim 60 million lives, these small gestures of humanity remind us that even enemies can break bread together, and in breaking bread, break down the barriers that divide the human family. The Sunday dinners of 1944 plant seeds of reconciliation that bloom into lasting peace, proving that the most powerful weapon against hatred is the simple act of welcoming a stranger to your table and calling him friend. The transformation extends beyond individual prisoners to entire camp populations. At Camp Greeley, Colorado, German POW Manfred Weiss organizes a prisoner choir that performs German Christmas carols at American church services. The irony overwhelms him. Enemy soldiers singing sacred music to the families of men they may have killed in combat. Yet the Colorado farm families welcome the prisoners' voices, recognizing shared spiritual heritage that transcends national boundaries. Weiss writes to his wife in Hamburg, "The Americans sing the same hymns we learned as children in Cologne Cathedral. They pray to the same Christ we pray to in Germany. How can we be enemies when we worship the same God, celebrate the same Savior, hope for the same peace?" The question haunts German prisoners across the American camp system. At Fort Francis E. Warren near Cheyenne, Wyoming, Unteroffizier Werner Braun struggles with the contradiction between Nazi racial ideology and American Christian practice. He observes Black American soldiers guarding German prisoners with the same professionalism as white guards. He watches Mexican-American families invite German POWs to Sunday dinners with the same hospitality as Anglo families. The Americans are not the racially pure Aryan society we were told they should be, he notes in his diary. Yet they are stronger than any nation I have seen. Perhaps strength comes from diversity rather than purity. Perhaps we Germans have been wrong about everything. The insight proves widespread among German prisoners. Nazi propaganda portrayed America as weak and divided, torn by racial conflict and class warfare. Instead, prisoners discover a nation that harnesses diversity as strength, that builds unity from difference, that welcomes even enemies into its communities. The contradiction between ideology and reality shatters German preconceptions about American society. At Camp St. Augustine, Texas, German prisoner Otto Rinkenaar experiences the most dramatic transformation. Invited to Sunday dinner by the Keitel family, he meets their daughter Amelia, a schoolteacher whose German immigrant grandparents fled Prussia in the 1890s. The connection proves immediate and powerful. Amelia speaks fluent German, understands German culture, and bridges the gap between enemy soldier and American civilian. Their courtship unfolds over months of Sunday dinners and supervised weekend outings. Otto learns American history from Amelia's perspective while teaching her about German literature and music. They discover shared loves of classical music, poetry, and mountain hiking. Their relationship symbolizes the possibility of reconciliation between former enemies through personal connection and mutual understanding. After the war, Otto returns to Germany to settle his affairs, then emigrates to America to marry Amelia. They establish Keitel's Motel in San Augustine, which becomes a landmark welcoming German tourists and business travelers for decades. Their marriage produces 4 children who grow up fully American while maintaining pride in their German heritage. The Rinkenaar story repeats across the American POW camp system, though usually without romantic complications. Hundreds of German prisoners maintain lifelong correspondence with American families. Dozens emigrate to America after the war. Many establish successful businesses, often in partnership with Americans they met during captivity. The success stories contrast sharply with German treatment of Allied prisoners. American POWs in German camps endure systematic starvation, brutal punishment, forced marches, and summary execution. The contrast becomes apparent to German prisoners who interact with American guards. They observe well-fed, well-treated American soldiers and realize their own armies practice cruelty that Americans refuse to reciprocate. Obergefreiter Heinrich Weber, captured at the Battle of the Bulge, writes to his brother serving on the Russian front, "The Americans treat us better than we treat our own horses. They give medical care to enemy wounded before treating their own scratches. They share cigarettes and chocolate with men who killed their friends. They invite us to their churches and homes as honored guests rather than conquered enemies. What kind of men show such strength through mercy?" The question penetrates to the core of German military culture. Prussian traditions emphasize rigid discipline, harsh punishment, and cruel treatment of enemies as signs of strength. American military culture demonstrates strength through restraint, power through protection of the weak, victory through preservation of dignity even for the defeated. The cultural education proves especially powerful for German officers accustomed to rigid military hierarchies. At Camp Greeley, Hauptmann Ludwig Sommer observes American officers eating the same food as enlisted men, living in similar quarters, and treating subordinates with respect rather than contempt. The democratic military culture challenges everything he learned at German officer schools. American officers lead through example rather than fear. He writes to his father, a retired Prussian colonel, "They earn respect through competence rather than demanding it through rank. Their soldiers fight harder because they fight willingly rather than from terror of punishment. Perhaps this is why they defeat us." The observation spreads throughout German prisoner populations as they observe American military practices firsthand. Guards rotate assignments to prevent corruption and ensure fair treatment. Camps operate under written regulations accessible to all prisoners. Complaints receive formal hearings with prisoner representation. The systematic fairness impresses Germans accustomed to arbitrary military justice. Sunday dinner programs also reveal American agricultural abundance that staggers prisoners from rationed Europe. At the Methodist Church in Basin, Wyoming, German Afrika Korps veteran Rolf Zimmermann helps American farmers harvest sugar beets during weekdays and joins them for Sunday dinners afterward. The abundance overwhelms him. Fresh beef every Sunday, vegetables from family gardens, milk and eggs without restriction, desserts made with real sugar and butter. A single American farm produces more food than an entire German village. He writes to his wife in Bavaria, "Their cattle are fat while ours starve. Their chickens lay daily while ours produce nothing. Their families eat meat twice daily while we eat it twice monthly. How can we win a war against such abundance?" The question haunts German military leadership as prisoner reports filter back to Germany through International Red Cross mail. American agricultural superiority translates directly to military advantage. Well-fed American soldiers outfight hungry German troops. American logistical networks supply abundance while German forces scrape for basic necessities. Italian prisoners experience different dynamics due to Italy's co-belligerent status after September 1943. At Camp Douglas, Italian service unit member Francesco Bruno attends Sunday dinner with the Catholic congregation of St. Mary's Church. The warmth of his reception contrasts sharply with German prisoner experiences, reflecting Italy's changed allegiance and American strategic calculations. "The Americans treat us as allies who lost our way rather than enemies who chose evil," Bruno writes to his sister in Naples. "They understand that ordinary soldiers follow orders rather than create policies. They blame Mussolini and his fascist party rather than the Italian people. This gives us hope for redemption through cooperation rather than punishment through defeat." Italian prisoners respond enthusiastically to Sunday dinner invitations, often contributing their own cooking skills to the meals. At St. Leonard's Church in Boston's North End, Italian service unit members prepare traditional Italian dishes using American ingredients, creating fusion cuisine that delights Italian-American parishioners eager to rediscover their culinary heritage. The cultural exchange flows both directions as Italian prisoners learn American customs while teaching traditional crafts and skills. At Camp Douglas, Italian POWs paint murals in the Officers Club depicting Western American scenes learned from conversation with Wyoming families. The artwork survives today as testimony to prisoner creativity and American appreciation for enemy artistic talent. Japanese prisoners face the most complex cultural barriers due to racial prejudice and language difficulties. At Anulialai Camp in Hawaii, Japanese POW Kenji Nakamura attends Sunday dinner with Japanese-American families also imprisoned by American authorities. The moral complexity overwhelms all participants. I am enemy prisoner treated with kindness, while they are loyal citizens treated with suspicion, Nakamura writes in his diary. They speak perfect English while I stumble through basic phrases. Their sons fight for America in Europe while I fought against America in Pacific. Yet they welcome me as brother because we share Japanese blood. What does this say about American understanding of loyalty and identity? The question proves particularly painful for Japanese-American families struggling with their own conflicted loyalties. George Yamada, whose son serves with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in Europe, explains his philosophy to Japanese prisoners. America made mistakes imprisoning us, but America admits mistakes and tries to correct them. We prove our loyalty through patience rather than bitterness, through service rather than protest. Our sons fight twice as hard to prove they belong to America. The example profoundly impacts Japanese prisoners educated to believe that surrender brings dishonor and death. They observe Japanese Americans maintaining dignity despite unjust imprisonment, contributing to American war effort despite discrimination, proving loyalty despite suspicion. The contrast with Japanese military culture proves stark. Sunday dinner conversations between Japanese POWs and Japanese American families explore fundamental questions about identity, loyalty, and belonging. American-born Nisei explain how they remain culturally Japanese while becoming thoroughly American. They demonstrate that national identity transcends racial origin, that loyalty stems from choice rather than blood, that belonging requires commitment rather than biology. These lessons prove revolutionary for Japanese prisoners indoctrinated to believe that racial purity determines national loyalty. They observe American society successfully integrating multiple ethnic groups into unified national identity. They see strength arising from diversity rather than homogeneity, unity emerging from choice rather than compulsion. The economic impact of POW labor programs becomes crucial to American wartime production. By December 1944, prisoners contribute 913% participation in essential labor, earning wages that total $22 million by June 1945. The money offsets camp operating costs while providing skilled labor for agriculture, timber operations, and military logistics. Farm families hosting Sunday dinners often employ the same prisoners during weekdays, creating sustained relationships that benefit both sides. The Schmidt family near Torrington, Wyoming, employs German prisoners Hans Weber and Friedrich Koch for autumn wheat harvest. Sunday dinners at the Schmidt table evolve into genuine friendship as the men share stories of farming techniques and family traditions. Weber, a farmer from Westphalia, learns American dry land farming methods suitable for German climatic conditions. Koch, a carpenter from Bavaria, teaches American crafts traditional German woodworking techniques. The knowledge exchange benefits both agricultural systems and builds foundation for post-war technical cooperation. The practical benefits extend beyond individual relationships to systematic knowledge transfer. American agricultural extension agents interview German prisoners about European farming methods, documenting techniques potentially useful for American conditions. German prisoners study American mechanization, crop rotation, and livestock management practices applicable to post-war German reconstruction. These technical exchanges plant seeds for future cooperation between American and German agricultural science communities. Post-war technical assistance programs build upon relationships established during Sunday dinner conversations in American farmhouses. The Marshall Plan's agricultural component succeeds partially because German farmers already understand and trust American methods through prisoner testimony. Religious communities provide the backbone for most Sunday dinner programs, interpreting Christian charity as requiring hospitality toward enemies. Father Michael O'Brien at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Douglas initially resists pressure to invite German prisoners to parish dinners. His own nephew died fighting in Normandy, making the prospect of entertaining German soldiers personally painful. The breakthrough comes when O'Brien converses with German prisoner Friedrich Bauer, a former seminarian studying for Catholic priesthood before military conscription. Their theological discussions reveal shared spiritual foundation transcending national boundaries. Bauer's obvious sincerity and deep religious knowledge convince O'Brien that enemies can be brothers in Christ despite opposing armies. If Christ commanded us to love our enemies, O'Brien tells his skeptical parish council, then we must demonstrate that love through concrete action rather than abstract sentiment. Feeding hungry men, regardless of their uniform, fulfills Christ's commandment to feed the hungry and welcome the stranger. The theological argument proves persuasive to American religious communities struggling with the ethics of befriending enemies. Churches across the nation develop similar programs, interpreting hospitality as Christian witness more powerful than any sermon. The practical results vindicate the theological reasoning as prisoners respond to kindness with gratitude and transformation. Protestant denominations participate eagerly in prisoner dinner programs, often competing with Catholic parishes for access to prisoner populations. The Methodist Church in Basin, Wyoming, organizes elaborate Sunday dinners for German Africa Corps veterans who share stories of desert warfare with fascinated American farmers who have never seen landscape more exotic than the Colorado Rockies. Lutheran congregations with German heritage feel particular kinship with German prisoners, often conducting services in German and inviting POWs to participate fully in religious observances. The cultural connections run deep as German prisoners rediscover religious traditions they abandoned during Nazi militarization of German society. In America, I remember how to pray, writes German prisoner Wilhelm Hartmann to his mother in Hamburg. The Nazi Party taught us to worship the state and the Führer rather than God. Here in Wyoming, American Lutherans remind me that German culture includes more than military conquest. They sing the same hymns my grandmother sang in Dresden, pray the same prayers my grandfather learned in Bavaria. I am German again rather than just Nazi soldier. The spiritual restoration proves common among German prisoners as American religious communities help them reclaim cultural identity beyond Nazi ideology. Many prisoners rediscover artistic, musical, and intellectual traditions that Nazi militarism suppressed. American families encourage prisoners to share German poetry, classical music, and philosophical traditions with genuine appreciation for German cultural contributions. The Sunday dinner programs face sustained opposition from American veterans organizations and patriotic societies that view prisoner hospitality as betrayal of American soldiers fighting overseas. The American Legion Post in Douglas, Wyoming, passes formal resolutions condemning coddling Nazi criminals while American boys die in foreign mud. Opposition intensifies when local newspapers publish photographs of German prisoners relaxing at American dinner tables while Gold Star mothers mourn their sons. The visual contrast proves emotionally devastating for families who have sacrificed everything for American victory while witnessing their government entertaining the enemy with apparent luxury. Walter Winchell's radio broadcasts amplify opposition sentiment with inflammatory rhetoric that reaches millions of Americans weekly. While your sons freeze in foxholes and bleed on beaches, he declares during his Sunday evening program, Washington wines and dines the killers in country club comfort. This isn't Christian charity, folks. This is national suicide disguised as virtue. Military officials defend the programs on strategic grounds that transcend emotional reactions. General Dwight D. Eisenhower argues before congressional committees that humane prisoner treatment encourages enemy surrenders, saving American lives. Every German who surrenders rather than fights to death is one less enemy shooting at American boys, he explains. Kindness becomes a weapon more powerful than bullets. The strategic argument proves compelling as German surrender rates increased dramatically during late 1944 and early 1945. Wehrmacht soldiers aware of American prisoner treatment choose capture over desperate resistance, accelerating German military collapse. The Sunday dinner programs contribute to victory by destroying German will to resist rather than German ability to fight. Camp commandants document prisoner attitude changes through systematic surveys and interviews. At Camp Douglas, Colonel William Harrison reports that 94% of German prisoners express positive feelings toward Americans after participating in Sunday dinner programs. Among those who maintain correspondence with American families after repatriation, 87% support democratic political parties during post-war German elections. The long-term strategic value proves immense as former prisoners become cultural ambassadors promoting American values throughout post-war German society. Their personal testimony counters Soviet propaganda about American imperialism and racism. When Germans must choose between Western democracy and Soviet communism, prisoner experiences tip the balance decisively toward the West. The success of American prisoner programs contrasts starkly with German treatment of Allied POWs, creating powerful ammunition for American psychological warfare. German prisoners who witness American generosity realize their own military practices contradict Geneva Convention requirements and basic human decency. Obergefreiter Kurt Müller, captured in the Ardennes Offensive, writes to his wife about the contrast. American prisoners in German camps receive bread and water if they are fortunate. We receive roast beef and apple pie at American family tables. American prisoners in Germany work 16 hours daily in war factories. We work 8 hours daily on American farms and attend Sunday church services. Which nation demonstrates Christian civilization? The question spreads throughout German prisoner populations as they compare their treatment with stories of Allied prisoners suffering in German camps. The moral contrast undermines Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda campaign. German prisoners realize they serve an evil cause that practices cruelty, while their enemies demonstrate virtue through mercy. The revelation proves particularly devastating for German officers trained to believe in Prussian military honor and European cultural superiority. They observe American military professionalism that exceeds German standards while American civilian culture demonstrates sophistication that challenges German assumptions about New World barbarism. Hauptmann Ernst Richter, captured at St. Vith, writes to his father about American military culture. Their officers treat enlisted men with respect we reserve for fellow officers. Their sergeants lead through competence rather than brutality. Their soldiers fight harder because they fight willingly rather than from fear. Perhaps American democracy creates better warriors than Prussian autocracy. The observation reaches German high command through prisoner mail monitored by German intelligence services. Reports of American military excellence and prisoner satisfaction demoralize German leadership already struggling with military setbacks. The Sunday dinner programs succeed as psychological warfare by demonstrating American strength through mercy rather than cruelty. As winter approaches in late 1944, the Sunday dinner programs expand despite continued controversy. Military officials recognize their strategic value in encouraging enemy surrenders and building foundation for post-war cooperation. Religious communities embrace their moral imperative to demonstrate Christian love through practical action. Farm families appreciate their economic benefits while discovering shared humanity with former enemies. The transformation proves mutual as both prisoners and hosts discover common ground across artificial barriers of nationality and ideology. American families realize that enemies are human beings misled by evil leaders rather than inherently evil themselves. German prisoners learn that Americans fight from principle rather than propaganda, that democratic values create strength rather than weakness. At the Morrison family ranch outside Douglas, Wyoming, Christmas dinner 1944 includes German prisoner Erwin Beckmann as an honored guest rather than enemy captive. Mrs. Eleanor Morrison carves turkey while Erwin describes Christmas traditions in his Bavarian hometown. The children exchange small gifts while sharing stories of Christmases past and hopes for Christmases future when war no longer separates families. The scene repeats across America as thousands of prisoners share holiday meals with American families. The moral courage required for such gestures, inviting enemies to sacred family celebrations while sons die fighting their armies, demonstrates American character more powerfully than any military victory. These quiet acts of heroism plant seeds of peace that bloom long after the war ends. Children who grow up knowing former enemies as family friends develop different attitudes toward international conflict. Religious communities that practice radical hospitality maintain commitment to peacemaking and reconciliation. Military officials who observe prisoner transformation advocate generous treatment of future defeated enemies. The Sunday dinner programs of World War II prove that even in humanity's darkest hours, light penetrates darkness through simple acts of compassion. Around American tables, former enemies discover shared humanity that transcends national boundaries. They learn that peace begins not with treaties but with willingness to see enemies as children of the same God, worthy of the same dignity, capable of the same transformation. Years later, when the world rebuilds from war's devastation, these small gestures of humanity bear fruit in lasting peace between former enemies. The Marshall Plan succeeds partially because German recipients remember American kindness during their captivity. NATO alliance flourishes because German partners recall American friendship when they were prisoners. The Atlantic community grows strong because its foundation rests not only on strategic calculations but on personal relationships forged over Sunday dinners when enemies learn to call each other friends. In a war that claims 60 million lives, the Sunday dinner programs remind us that humanity survives even total conflict. They prove that the most powerful weapon against hatred is the simple act of sharing a meal with someone you are supposed to despise. They demonstrate that peace begins with ordinary people choosing extraordinary compassion, one Sunday dinner at a time. The legacy endures long after the last prisoner returns home and the last camp closes. American families who hosted enemy soldiers maintain correspondence spanning decades. Former prisoners who experienced American hospitality become advocates for democratic values throughout reconstructed Europe. Children who shared dinner tables with former enemies grow up committed to international understanding and peaceful conflict resolution. The Sunday dinners of 1944 and 1945 plant seeds of reconciliation that bloom into lasting peace, proving that even enemies can break bread together, and in breaking bread, break down the barriers that divide the human family. In our broken world, where conflicts still rage and hatred still divides, their example reminds us that peace remains possible when ordinary people choose extraordinary love, one shared meal at a time.